Alright, hello guys. Today is just start of the 3rd of March 2025. It's been a while since I've recorded anything, so welcome to the least professional YouTube channel existing. And as you can see from the screen I'm showing here, it's gonna be all about the latest situations about the Ukrainian president and President Trump. Before I start recording, I'd like to say thanks to a couple of economics, which is Matthew Mazinski, who actually gave me like a chance to speak about the situation in Ukraine at length. So you can see this video on his channel. We started as something which would be like a little conversation just to cover a few topics on Ukraine, and ended up going into literally 4 hour like long talk about history, about events, about certain ideas that happening in the world. It's like how things were developing historically and the way the situations is now. So if you see this video, feel free to go to his channel. Uh, the video is Ukraine Spotlight. It's actually under his live events. So yes, we were live a couple of weeks ago already. Just for the start of it, I would like to say that hey, I'm gonna make the video, put the video on my channel, but I just generally think that he was the one who gave me a chance to speak, so it will be just fair if people go and watch our conversation if you're interested in learning a bit more about history, about certain historic events that we've discussed with him. We've actually discussed Trump with him over there, and in the last few days, as we can see, Trump has basically set off to prove anybody he could prove wrong wrong. So when this whole Trump election was starting, I was going like, look, Trump was the first person to give Ukraine weapons. So I'm gonna be very careful about things he says because always not always the things he says is the things he does, but it's also the fact that it was like in his first presidency, there was too often when people would take a little snippet of what he said over the whole event, and then they will say, but this is snippet is bad, so the whole event is bad, and quite often they would essentially change things to the point where you go like and watch whatever he says. It's like, okay, that's not even what he said. So in this case, I was like, look, I'll be careful. I'll be like, careful about what he says because obviously Trump already had some experience of being a president, and as it stands at the moment, the Trump clearly shows something which I have made a comment about, so that I'm not lying. I'm just kind of right when I was watching this one. It seems to me that Trump is turning into Biden number two. So, and a senile old man who started mixing events of his life, it's just that they puff their chest on the different topics, right? That's kind of how it looks to me, right? Because when Trump is going on about that, oh, Putin is gonna, follow through with his agreements with Trump, it's kind of like very weird to me because in his first presidency, Trump was actually gone to Moscow. Those who remember, most of the people don't. And once he went to Moscow, they have actually agreed a ceasefire. He said he went out. He stood there with Putin, giving a press conference, and they were saying, "We agreed the ceasefire. It's gonna last, and things are gonna be great." And Putin has broke the ceasefire before Trump's plane has left the ground in Moscow. So the time it took Trump to finish the conference, drive from the that press conference, and get onto his plane before the plane was in the air. So it took about like 40 minutes to an hour. In that 40 minutes to an hour, there was a huge artillery barrage from Russians towards Ukrainians, breaking the ceasefire. Putin has just agreed with Trump. So the fact that Trump is now like repeating that Putin would not fuck him, it's like, dude, are we living in the same universe? Right? So, so it's like the way they're acting as well, it's reminiscent of a very interesting story I once heard by somebody who went to make a deal in China, and then they were like making a deal. They went in there to sign some documents and stuff like this. But then when they came to actually sign the documents, it turned out that they were signing up for something completely different, which was actually discussed. And that's how this situation looks like. You know, some people say, "Oh, President Zelensky should have really handled it better." It's like, I'm sorry, guys, but if you're acting in bad faith, it's very hard to come into situation and somebody acting in bad faith, and that was a bad faith action, to react in it very quickly, especially if you're making such a big scene out of it. You know, puffing and puffing, despite the fact that, look, you know, and his once JD and Cook, how probably a good name for these two. Yeah, JD and Cook. Sounds brings back memory of my trip to Bulgaria, but don't ask. But JD and Cook essentially came up talking about certain things. And was it correct to raise the issue of, well, maybe having a conversation with Putin about a ceasefire? I was like, yes, perfectly well. And Zelensky perfectly well said, look, guys, unless there's some guarantees that the ceasefire is going to last, like it's very hard to believe in it. Right, so let's do a ceasefire, but can we have some guarantees that this ceasefire is actually going to be there? And he's been trying to be very nice, very polite about this. In the situation where they essentially changed the conversation from one thing that they were talking about to something very different. And Trump and JD and his coke, like, you know, sitting there puffing their chests, was a bit wrong way of dealing with this. And the way he reacted is like was very tame. And many people might react very differently. The guy is dealing with not with plain acting out the was it Truman Show, the one with Jim Carrey. Like he's not acting in the Truman Show. He's not acting in the movie where this whole script is written and you go like, yeah, yeah, you know, it's like it's an old Senile man. He's coming there. You come in there. You call him out for to sign a certain treaty, and then some guy who's like really not supposed to even kind of pick a fight in that room starts picking a fight. It's very hard to react. Any of us would be like, okay, I'm either react by telling him to go fuck himself, or I react by trying to cool down the situation. So I if I was in such a situation, I probably would have exploded in someone's face. It's been in my life history where I've acted against my best interest in such situations. So I'm not going to be the one judging President Zelensky here. I mean, I think he's done a pretty good job of trying to keep his cool, but he rightfully just laughed and went to Europe. So overall, if we look at the actions of Trump and the words he's saying, it's like very much like Biden, like what Biden was saying, like the right things, like was puffing his chest and saying like, okay, we're helping Ukraine, but we're sending them one tank a month and like I don't know, 300 shells and 20 missiles. Right? It's like it's wonderful that you're helping Ukraine, but like if you know spoon feeding the help, which means that Ukraine cannot actually act, it's kind of weird. Like so, and same thing happens here. Like you know, they're puffing their chest and saying, "Oh look, we are gonna be like making a deal with Putin." It's like, okay, great. We love the idea. What's the deal? You know. Sorry. And the idea is there is no deal. There's nothing to talk about yet. They can't even guarantee anything because they have no deal. They have nothing. Right? In many other occasions, you see Trump saying, which is like kind of the things he was saying from the very beginning, like, "Oh, let's drain the swamp. Let's make sure this big, this we make the system fair again." And like, okay, he sends in masks to essentially decimate the government. All right, but you need to redo the government. Like I was saying myself plenty of times, saying that look, our government has essentially turned into like a like as we talked when we were talking with Matthew, it's like it's geriatric governments, like and it's not just the governments in the parliaments, it's a lot of people who are supposed to be running things on the sports. They've been sitting there for like 60 years and still wouldn't fuck off. And yes, it needs to be cleaned up, yes, but there's ways and means of doing so. And right now, everything seems to be done on a level of like, let's talk shit on Twitter and see what sticks. It doesn't work like this, right? It's like, you look, it's people who don't seem to kind of understand what they're doing. And there seems to be a lack of understanding from their thing. It's like something you can do in a company you don't really give a shit about is one thing, because obviously if you fail at Twitter by doing crazy stuff, okay, Twitter's gonna die. Nobody's gonna really like notice it. But if you fail it in something as big as the government, and like I said, the government machine needs cleaning up, the technology needs to be improved. Like great example everybody was talking about was like when they were saying like the system was showing that we're paying pensions to like so many 150 euros. So it's like, and it's like thousands of people who are apparently 150 years and more, which was, and people were, yeah, but it's this old system and it was not calculated for this, and that's why it was coming up with this error. It's like, yeah, it's an error. It needs to be fixed, and people need to fix it instead of like just pretending things don't exist. And there's lots of systems like this in all our governments. Like I lived in England, I lived in France, I lived in Germany, I was lived in Ukraine, I lived in Netherlands, and there's like and if you see the governments of like Netherlands and Ukraine actually kind of trying to renew themselves, trying to clear out the mud because they have the pressure from both sides. In America, it seems like the ruling, like the whole government machine, and for example in Germany as well, the whole government machines quite often are happy to live in 1975 and pretend that it's perfectly well. Why? Because that's when most of these people were actually young and happy and could still afford to have sex. But since then, long time has passed and they're still there, right? But the way he does it, the way he goes about it, again, it's senile. It's like he reminds me of, like if you've ever been in the old people's home, right? I've been there a couple of times and I've seen a couple of times how people are looking after this senile old people, and those old people, they're like they live in their little walls, right? And then but they still, quite fast at pulling some pranks and stuff like this. They're not evil per se, they just senile. And these are the actions, this is how the actions of Trump seem to me. In beginning of 2021, I believe I made a video where I have said that there's going to be a time where we are in the time where the American president is going to run out of sand, and Biden has proven me wrong. And now it seems to me that the Trump is planning to do the same thing. It's like he's running on his last legs. He is picking fights with people he shouldn't pick fights with, people who he should be getting together with to be clearing that swamp, he's actually picking a fight with Canada, Mexico, Europe, Ukraine. So these are like people who are supposed to be like, holding your back. These are the people who like interested in your success. But instead, he's actually picking a fight with them. And yes, he says the correct thing, for example, that the trade deficit of US with many places is ridiculous. Except he's not, is either he's not coherent enough or he's not brave enough to say why this is happening. He doesn't have the balls to say that, I don't know, I had some videos coming up on my way, how John Deere, an American company, screwing American farmers. In the meantime, John Deere is actually moving their production from US to mostly to Mexico because they can get a very cheap slave labor there, like paying their employees in Mexico like 10 times less, at least 10 times less than what they're paying to employees in US. Why? Because in Mexico they can just afford to drive people into slavery, and the local government is not doing anything about it. So now, instead of fighting John Deere with the help of Mexican government by creating the situation where the Mexican government can tell the American companies, yes, you have to pay higher wages, by working with Mexican government to improve the laws in Mexico and fighting the cartels, he's fighting the Mexican government. That's insane. It's like a lot of things happen, similar things happening with Canada, where the American companies have moved a lot of their stuff to Canada for whichever reasons, and then the girl was like, okay, let's fight Canada. It's like, well, no, not really. You're not making things better because the companies that are abusing the system, they will still find the loopholes to abuse the system, and unless you call name call them, name them, and shame them, things are not gonna get better. And unfortunately, you see that Trump is actually pushing everyone away from America. And if you're gonna have 4 years of this, I mean, it's already now that people go like, you know what, we don't really need America. I mean, the only country that actually need America right now, surprisingly, is China. No, seriously, the only country in the world that right now needs America, like is China. Like the international trade, which people rightfully said that American navies played a very big role in like protecting maritime trade. The country that won most from that was China, right? Maybe a little bit of India, but not by much. And to be honest, like Europe can go just okay. We don't really care. Like, Europe has everything they can do. They produce everything inside of Europe. The minority of things they don't, they can fix that. They have access to Africa, so like the ways to produce things in Africa. So pushing away Europe instead of using the connections that US has to achieve his goals, which is fair trade around the world, and making sure that American people get a fair deal and that they get fair jobs and fair wages, of using that political capital that US has to influence these big corporations, financial corporations in the first place, which drive this insane kind of like ideas about crazy rentals, by pushing people to take, by cheating people into taking on like hundreds, over 100% loans to buy properties and then rent them out at super high prices, essentially destroying the local rental and property markets, essentially creating a situation, something I talked about all the way in 2017, where I was saying, look, these are the basic needs, and we're destroying that low layer of the basic needs where people are capable, where people can actually afford to rent or buy properties. Fighting those people, he doesn't do this. So I think that Trump is essentially Biden #2, only very aggressive one. The Biden just now, he was like a bit of a chill guy. I'm just gonna go back to bed. Thank you for listening what I have not said, but I'm done now. This guy, I think he probably listened to one of my videos where I had said that we need to put our parliamentarians on a mix of Viagra and cocaine so that they can remind them that there is life still exists. I have a strong suspicion that right now Trump is going to be able to, even if he dies, like, his heart is going to stop and he's going to continue going. He's going to be able to continue for at least another 2 weeks or a couple of months just because it's going to be a very different organ pumping his blood. But at the moment, like the impression is that the Trump is gone senile, and we kind of missed that moment because he continued saying the same things that he was saying previously, and we just went like, okay, he seems to make sense. People who voted for him, he was saying the same things he said the first time, and they still make sense. And the reason he's saying them is just because he does not know how to say anything different. And in his mind, I think he's still somewhere in like 2017 or something like this. Because this guy is out of touch with reality. And his friend JD and Cook is just there to empower him to continue with this media performance. So that's my thought on the situation. I know they're a bit confusing. I know I have not scripted them. And remember, as ever, I said that was doing these videos partially because I wanted to share my thoughts, throw them up there into the ether, so to say, but also to just have an opportunity to talk, have an opportunity to try and build my thoughts in the moment, just as I go, because otherwise I'm just gonna go turn myself into a complete antisocial person who will never be able to talk to human beings ever again. So, thank you for your time, right? And again, like check out Procopolis Economics, right? There's a conversation between me and Matthew there, and the guys talk mostly about like how about Bitcoin and things like this. So if you're interested in Bitcoin markets, again, check them out. Quite a lot of interesting info for that. And thanks for the guys who support in Ukraine. Thanks for giving me opportunity to talk. I hope that things are gonna get improved soon. Those of us who actually follow the events, we all understand that actually Russia is not doing as well as JD and Cox says, right? Those of us who follow, those of us who speak more than one language, obviously, if you don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, but you want some news or some questions, feel free to ask, guys. Like, just leave a comment. I'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much. Goodbye.